This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. We have brought a special horror guest, Dr. Jonathan Ball, to help us break story on a horror story. Right now, we have exactly half an hour before Dan has to get somewhere, Justin. So,
can we make up a horror graphic novel story? Because
sure, same basic.
I don't think it is the same basic elements. So this is my theory. You guys can correct me on this, maybe. So I think you've got three core types of conflict, right? Your external conflict, which is usually best served in film. You've got your social conflicts, which are usually best served in the theater. You've got your internal conflicts, which are usually best served in prose fiction. Like, just in terms of the medium, that's what they lend themselves best towards. Well, of course, they can do other things. I think my theory of this, and you guys can maybe correct me, I think the graphic novel medium, is a comics medium, let's say, is an interesting one because, to me, like, the conflict that works best in comics is a formal conflict between, so for example, how Justin's artwork works so well and lends itself so well to, I think, comics is like you've got this formal setup often between like things that are very large trying to overwhelm things that are small, and like the formal struggle between like this large thing trying to overwhelm a small thing and this small thing trying to not be subsumed. I think like that weirdly is a conflict that can proceed and escalate and develop throughout the comics medium. And like those sorts of formal conflicts, I think, lend themselves best to
I think
comics.
what you're recognizing, though, and Justin just had a sharp intake of breath, so I know he has something to add here, that images allow you to establish what prose takes a long time to establish. So in the image, you can have the symbolism of the big versus small tacitly present right up front and not mention it.
But can you structure a story that way?
But in prose, you have to build up to the symbols and let the reader finally realize it over maybe the course of 100 pages that's what you've established. So that is absolutely true that comics are different in that way, but I don't think they're...
What I mean is that I think the conflicts that work best in comics, and maybe you can correct me, but I think the conflicts that work best in conflicts are formal conflicts that are expressed visually, and they develop. I mean, you got other things happening, of course, in a story. But you can even just take this narrative away and have, like...
what were you going to throw
A
in
Week
there?
of Days does that, and Siaman de Bon sort of does that kind of formal development.
I was just gonna I'm looking at, I've got a couple canvases on the wall across from me of my stuff and a lot of big versus small examples, and what I really love about that composition is the implied narrative. Mm-hmm. You don't need to see what happened before to know a lot of stuff just happened and we have this snapshot of the moment. But in storytelling, you usually have to show the build up and like the lead off. But what I like about that single composition is what it does to the mind of the viewer. Like, they can't help but create the world of the before and after this snapshot of this huge monster and this little warrior.
So I'm curious about how you guys would take a comic, like develop a comic story then. Because to me, like if I was going to try to develop a comic story, I would start with, okay, well, is there a formal visual conflict that I can center things around and start developing?
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So,
and I would start weirdly, like I would come up with like a form and visual schematic.
So I thought we were going to do a story break episode.
Well, this should become a story break.
It sounds like what we're going to do instead is we're going to talk about the mechanics of certain compositions in order to establish. So for example, if you're doing a horror story, one of the conflicts that you have to overcome is decide how much you're going to show or not show. What's happening between panels or on panel. Right? So if you have, it's like the classic example, and I'm stealing this right from Scott McCloud's Making Comics, you can have the axe overhead, and then the next panel shows a scream, and you know what happened in the space between, or you can show the axe hitting someone and the blood spurting and the head rolling off, and which kind of horror you want, you have to decide how much you're going to show. But then you also have this relationship between tone, so like in the Imagination Manifesto, one of my early things, I was trying to experiment with how little I could show. How much could I make completely obscured with black and just have things peek into it? And I'm staring at my collage here that has a whole bunch of pieces from that, where only a little bit of the face is showing through, only a little bit of the fingers, maybe the barrel of the gun. So it's just what is being revealed, right? But it is still just setting up that explanation.
Well, let's break story though. But like, what I mean is like, let's break a comic story. And this is my experiment I want to try with you guys because
Okay.
you're comics guys. So let's break a comic story around. This is the concept: greens versus reds. Let's just break it. Like that's where we're going to start. We're going to develop a story out of
Greens versus reds.
Greens versus
okay,
reds.
now what's interesting is
Does
in
that make
comics
sense?
you can do that because in illustration, color matters. The color theory is the thing. So who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and which will that color represent? Justin, go. Who's bad and who's good?
So we can have like a real story with characters and stuff, but like just the visual dynamic.
No,
I
but
wanna
let's just
think
be
about
visual.
Is
Is the good guys green or the good guys red?
Good guys are green.
Good guys are green?
Yeah.
Okay, so red is the bad guy. So immediately what I see, and I use this in Will I See, you can now use a single panel just with the color red filling in as that midpoint. So imagine what I was saying before. You have the axe raised, then you have a single red panel, right? Then you have another panel with a scream. The color fills in everything that happened without you having to show anything, right? So it's green. Okay, so we're going to do a story break.
So when you say like green versus red, you're just like the
visually
Just as
it's
a
going to
color?
somehow
Yeah.
that's going to be like a visual concept that
Yeah.
we're going to just develop throughout this.
Right.
So it's the jungle.
something. No, I'm thinking. What about something in a greenhouse and a gardener is cutting up bodies and putting them in plants and then selling the plants or something to dispose of the bodies.
We had that in, dear listener, we had that happen in Canada. Do you remember? You
Yeah,
realize
yeah,
you're
yeah.
stealing
Is
this
that a
right
real
from the
thing?
news. That's a real thing.
He's
I don't
putting
want
in
to like
potted
glorify
plants,
that person,
yeah.
but
I
yeah.
haven't heard that.
Yeah, hit people. Okay, so we've got a gardener. And so here's a funny thing. I'm going to digress for a moment. I don't like glorifying real acts of violence, but I sure do like making them up. And I'm not sure what that says about me or the people who like to read those things, but nonetheless. So we have a gardener. We don't have time to change any idea that we stick to. So here we are now. Green versus red is our color theme. Red's going to represent the bad. It's a gardener in a greenhouse. Is that the hero
So
or
are
the
the-
monster?
I feel like there's a mulcher of
think
some
the-
kind involved.
I
Okay,
think
so
the
the
gardener is
gardener.
a monster, and somehow the greenhouse will turn on him, like in some sort of strange development.
Maybe the plants will like the more people he feeds to the plants, the more the plants
They
start
become
to change.
carnivorous,
Okay, so a little bit.
and they start to crave the flesh.
What's the one with the musical and the plant?
Oh,
Little Shop of
Little Shop of
Horrors.
Horrors. So we got to steer clear of Little Shop of Horrors. But you have 22 pages to set up this comic. So page 1, you have the greenhouse. You show all the green. You show all that color. You show the lush like idea of nature. But you said the green's going to be the good guys. So this comes to your idea of the greenhouse itself becomes the hero in the end, right?
Yeah, it's the monsters. He's like he starts to kill.
So
For
let's have
whatever
that
reason.
gardener, and instead of yellow gloves, which you often see the gardener in, we'll give him red gloves. So,
Sure.
so it's immediately follows. You set up 3 rules of horror recently in another podcast, which were that it has to be
Abnormal.
abnormal, transgressive, and symbolic.
Sure.
So he's an abnormal gardener because why?
'Cause he's killing people.
Because he's killing people. Okay, good. What is the transgressive things that's going on? He's putting them.
He's
in-
killing. He's not just putting them in. He's like blending them into. He's
burying
like
them
a
in
fertilizer smoothie.
Yeah.
For the
Oh, okay. All right.
There
Who
was,
are his victims and why do
was
they?
it a New Zealand
why do they
horror
deserve it?
movie? Maybe it was New Zealand or Australian, where it was a fertilizer company and they were kind of crazy killers as well, and some teenagers like trespassed onto their land, and they had them tied up, and the one guy pushed one of the teenagers into their like fertilizer mulcher machine, and then he realized that the scared meat blood of somebody he just killed was like really high levels of whatever they needed in their fertilizer. So he started this trend of like torturing people in like a horrific way so he could kill them.
Somehow epinephrine levels helped
Yeah, yeah.
his.
It
yeah,
was
okay.
it's kind of a dark comedy. It's not straight up horror. It was kind
Gotcha.
of goofy.
Kind of like Placid
this-
or Tremors.
Feed me, Carbon! Feed me now!
I can't.
Page 1,
That could
establishing
be
image.
page 1 is
Yeah.
the scene of him standing over the body like, okay, what do I do now? Where do I put this?
So,
Yeah,
so here's
yeah.
my thought though. Page 1 of your comic is the greenhouse, establishing what
Just
it is.
all greens,
Then
all
now
shades
you
of greens.
open
It parts and the blood
to a
is on the.
2-page spread of inside the greenhouse,
Yeah.
and on the one side you have the entrance of the greenhouse with all of the greens and all. And I met my wife in a greenhouse, so I know all about. And at the other side of that page is
Big
the
splash
red.
of
Yeah,
red,
as a splash, which then forces you now to turn the page again. It makes you complicit in the horror, and then the next 2 page sequence, whether it's panels or a spread, shows the horrible actions of the character.
While we're like
He's
blue
cutting up a
skying this,
body or
let's do
whatever.
foil red for all the.
Oh, yeah.
shiny
Spot UV,
red.
maybe? Spot UV
yeah,
on all the
yeah,
reds?
yeah.
So now we've gotten into the first 5 pages. You now have no more time in a 22-page comic to establish the set. You don't have any more real estate. Now you have to get into some actual plot actions. So somebody, maybe I think, arrives too soon or too late to the scene. Right? They're picking up their plants. They have a little bit of exposition, like they're driving their car up the lane. They're like, oh, this is my favorite. These plants always grow so well. Oh, maybe there's a secret ingredient. No, Marcia, it's just seeds. Like all plants are the same, right? You have some kind of thing like that.
A little bit of Sweeney Todd going on here.
Yeah.
too.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So then they arrive, and how do we get them across that threshold in a way that is interesting to the reader? What brings them there?
Is this Gardner like super charming and smiley and like Mr. Rogers-esque, or is he kind of a creepy dude? I feel like he should be like a Ned Flanders.
Okay,
Like
so let's
just-
imagine
yeah.
it's a Ned Flanders type, and he just comes bumbling out.
Maybe
and
he even just has an appointment for these people. They're picking up their thing. He forgot about it, or just whatever. Maybe he's killed his business partner, or something has happened. We don't know the backstory of who this
Yeah, we
person
don't know
is
the
yet.
backstory, yeah.
And he's like dealing with them. He
Rival florist.
trying to keep them away from going back here or whatever.
Okay, so they arrive, they're picking up their plants. That gets us maybe 2 pages in, right, where we show them come up, we have a page of exposition, we introduce ourselves to those people. Now we're rounding out close to the 10-page mark. We better get into some serious action. They find or spot some activity. Maybe the blood has too recently been put into the plants, and so when they pick up, say, I used to work in a greenhouse in my misspent youth.
Somebody could drop a potted plant and it bleeds onto the floor.
This is what I'm saying. Like, it could
That's
be,
great.
if the water is too soon or like it's not dry enough, then they're heavier and they're dripping and there's red. And he could talk about like, oh, there's a lot of iron in this soil. Like, there's a lot of things you could say.
Or it could be somebody notices that we can kind of skip ahead in time, and there's certain plants that are growing really well, but those certain plants are a very specific kind of plant that only grow well in cemeteries or
Oh, funny, yeah.
like
I like your visual of like somebody drops the plant trying to transport it out. It cracks the whole
Yeah.
thing breaks and there's like a human hand now.
Yeah.
a
Or
bunch of
two,
dirt and a
something
human
smaller,
hand
yeah,
like
even two.
lying or whatever.
Fingernails.
Like a
maybe.
finger in the soil.
What if you have, okay, you want to set up what the actual sort of dark comedy is that the people are in there. Those people who've come to get the plants, they leave, and on the lane, right, you could still use the same, because it's one verb per character per panel, they could come and go. And in those same panels, you could have like a police detective arriving, right?
maybe we don't show that that's how he's been disposing of the bodies. The whole first 3 acts of the comic is just the
We don't
police
know
catching
what's-
this
yeah.
serial murder, and it's the reveal at the end that he has put like over 40 different bodies have been distributed throughout the city in these potted plants, and that's the reveal at the end.
See, I like moving to some
so
sort
kind of
of
a short story,
Yeah, you could do
more
it.
of a like Tales. If we're going the Tales of the Crypt,
But Tales of
thing,
the Crypt,
they only have half an hour to
The
do
vines
this.
have to come and entangle him and
That's
choke
right.
him out. Like the
Yeah.
cops can't solve the mystery.
So I like your idea. So if we take your idea of the plant that only grows in the cemetery, and
Yeah.
he actually has been feeding it, unbeknownst to him,
yeah, he didn't realize.
right, that his terrible transgressive behavior has caused the plant to cross the line from
Yeah.
a typical sort of benign synanthropic species into
We
one
have
that
that
now
scene like you shouldn't
must
be able
have.
to grow this plant. The only way this plant thrives is if it's like
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
human
feeding on a
remains.
corpse,
Yeah,
yeah.
by slaughterhouses or by.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so you could build
And
up
then
to
it
that.
just starts to feed its way into him somehow.
So the old DC horror comics, you never see the aftermath, right? You just build up. So you'd set up the tone. You'd have a few pages where you show the greenhouse and all that green. You show how the person is killed and put into the potted plants. You have a little bit of humor where someone shows up and they're thrilled to have the plant. And then somebody shows up, maybe a horticulturalist who is then talking about this plant, right? Finding out about it.
Then I like this like plants eat them in the end.
and then the
They're
plants
too
come and eat
hungry.
them.
It makes me think, you mentioned the other podcast we did, Creep Show at the start. It makes
Yeah.
me think a little bit of the fungus that takes over the guy in Creep Show.
Right, yeah.
That, something along those lines could be like moving towards your final image.
He's slowly feeding what becomes a monster.
So what if the
Yeah.
horticulturalist has arrived to buy the greenhouse, but it turns out he wants to buy it from a serial killer, and so it should be that it's a terrifying moment where he finds out that it's a serial killer there, but he's not concerned because he is able to somehow activate the plant to eat the guy, and then you have this great EC horror like monster finish where you have the creepy horticulturalist, the evil plant, and the actual victim of the story is the murderer from the first 20 pages. I think that could be a good twist. How many minutes do we have left? 11 minutes.
It's a good little short story.
Good job.
Must be blood.
Tui, that's disgusting.
So let's imagine we're not in
horror
charge.
comics thing.
Right? We've been given this script now. This is an important thing because this happens in comics. You get given a script,
guys.
and you're not in charge, right? You have to then interpret that script. Let's imagine that the story we've been given, right, that we just came up with, is the script we're given, which means we're not allowed to change it except in visual elements. We can change visual elements of the script, but not plot elements of the script.
So how would each of you deal with it separately? I'm
Yeah.
curious about that. Like, how would you do it versus how would Justin do it?
I can already kind of envision the visually how I would be handling this.
So lay it out.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's funny
to
because
describe.
I know
yeah.
the shades of green I would use. It would I would have like no flowers. It would all be green. So when you do have that red, it is so stark. Like everything would have like a bit of green thrown into it.
see,
Would you
and
end up with red flowers at the
see,
end or
no,
something?
well,
or
maybe
no?
red flowers at the end, but what I
Or would you
see
just be sticking with green?
visually is that these greens, like when we're talking about these greens, yeah, the plant green, but also I love the idea of, because it's a greenhouse, you have these yellow beams that are interacting with that green, making that green yellow kind of vibe, which then on our color wheel, color theorists, when the red shows up, if you have it as true red, it's going to pop against that
yeah.
green and yellow so brightly. And if you were going to use a spot UV,
I think
then
I'm going to
be-
use spot UV. Yeah.
it would be bonkers, right? So then you don't want to overuse it. Then the red, in my mind, is maybe his rubber boots
It's a
and his gloves
punctuation. It's
a couple of times, and then you save the big reveal of that red for later. So you make the gloves, the boots, the drips.
maybe have a full
So you're
page
escalating
spread or
up
two
to
that's
it.
now
Yeah.
is all red.
Yeah.
Like everything. And you like how I would build this just from like a technical standpoint is probably I would be doing things in grayscale and then like overlaying the green afterwards.
yeah.
So making
Yeah.
sure things work as black and white and then turning that black and white to shades of green.
Which is a good general, like if you have lots of objects that overlap that are from the same color family, that can be a really good shortcut to figure out whether your composition is good.
Using grayscale?
Yeah,
Is it kind of like...
do it in gray first.
I've
yeah.
heard musicians say that, like, even if they're punk or heavy metal musicians, they'll sometimes say, like, if the song works on an acoustic guitar, it's a good song.
Same
Right.
deal. If you take a illustration that's fully colored and you turn it to grayscale and it gets all muddy, then you need to work on something.
Yeah.
But if it works in grayscale once it's colored, then you know.
And for the dear listener who
Pretty
doesn't
strong.
know what we mean by muddy, what we're looking for is high contrast. So you can tell the different layers, the foreground, midgrounds, backgrounds, in a well-balanced grayscale image. It will work as well as it does in a well-balanced color image. But if everything seems now to be super flat, and the term we use is muddy, right, where everything kind of bleeds together, then maybe you need to change your contrast.
Yeah.
And easiest thing for a person just starting out is to remember that all objects cast shadows on the objects they're touching, right? That every object that is touching another object is casting a shadow on that object. It's the one thing that I find with students who are just beginning to draw complicated compositions really helps, because you can draw a rough layout really quickly and then go in with a heavy black or with a charcoal and then just start smudging in shadows. When every object, anywhere an object overlaps, it casts a shadow. And now you have a really high contrast composition, and the farther away you want something to feel, you make that shadow deeper, right? That can really work in a long composition. Like if you want to show a corridor, right? You have your receding, what's the word I'm looking for? Perspective lines. There you go. And they come to a final point. If you color that in point real dark, it seems far away, right? It's the most erudite example I can give.
Figured out my cover. I'm gonna call the story Green Thumb, and it's gonna be a fingerprint like a fingerprint made out of like green leaves, but then there's like a spot of blood at the top of the fingerprint, and it's like dripping down.
Yeah. Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
On
a black background.
See, I would have the cover be a hill with one of those old school like British glass greenhouses on the top of the hill.
That's where I see this whole thing taking
Right.
place too, is in a big glass greenhouse.
And that spot UV is in all the panels of glass of the greenhouse. It's called the greenhouse, but it's red.
What do you guys mean by spot UV? I don't quite understand that.
So it's like you print something normally, CMYK, so it's printed like a normal color, and then they go on with a special plate, and it's almost like adding a varnish to it, so that one spot is really shiny.
Oh, okay.
So it immediately, your eye is drawn immediately to that one shiny spot.
The reason you don't see it a lot anywhere is it's
very
prohibitively
very
expensive. So
Really?
when Justin said, as long as we're dreaming up something,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
This is the perfect version of it.
We're not talking about one hungry plant here. We're talking about world conquest.
I think the trick and the thing to really keep in mind as a writer is be like to not write many words.
No, not at first. You
like
want-
I would go like maybe 5 pages without a word in your scenario.
Him
But
killing
until
the
the people
person
show
and
up.
disposing
Yeah.
of the body, I
Yeah.
think is completely silent.
Yeah.
There's no words until that first person shows up.
You don't know who the
Yeah.
person is. You don't know why. You maybe never learn who that person
That's
is.
right. And I think a lot of people don't realize that if they're wanting to write comics, they don't have to put words on every panel. They've written the panel. Someone else drew it. They don't have to then come in. But what also can be a good tool is if you can write it out silently, then the artist produces it. You can go back in and add exposition. You can add some words. You can add some things over top of it.
The
Or
Marvel
tell
method.
his backstory as he's
Right.
disposing of the body.
You could make that decision. Now, the hiccup that you may run into if you do it that way, and the artist doesn't know that you're planning to put in exposition or put in stuff over top.
You need a room for those
Yeah, they
panels.
haven't left room in their own compositions for it. So that can be a troublesome thing. So what you communicate to your illustrator in that case is that I have the plot points. I'm not sure how much exposition there will be, but there will be some.
So if it was me writing this first scene, we show the establishing shot of the greenhouse. We go in, we see that he's just recently killed somebody. I think I'd have panels of just every day. It's Tuesday. It's this temperature outside. These are ready to be harvested. These flowers are about to go on sale. And in between these like little like snippets of like
You
everyday
see the-
information, we see him hacking apart a body.
Right.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That contrast, like those juxtapositions, are really powerful in
And that
comics.
shows that this is everyday. This isn't something unusual. It's very calm, collected. He's done this before.
Right.
We're establishing that
It's got like
Again-
a mortar and pestle and it's grinding the teeth, so they're just powder and sprinkling them in on the, yeah.
See,
I
to
have
me
to
again,
remember to pay-per-view that show. You know.
to me, like those are the kinds of conflicts that work best in comics. Like here's a normal everyday, like it's 42 degrees, it's whatever, and then like hacking apart a body,
covered in blood
So like just
with
the
a hacksaw.
the
So
text
what
is
you're
doing
talking about, yeah.
text is mundane. The the visuals are these graphic horrors.
And this is why film borrows from comics so much and why comics borrow from film so much, even though they are separate mediums, is this idea that the viewer is not complicit in what they're shown next. You get to show them whatever you want to show them. Now, in a film, you just cut to it. If you want to, disturb somebody, you just cut to something horrible. In comics, the best way to do it is to hide it on the page turn. Right? So they're reading along and then they get to the page and they're like, oh, what a pleasant day at the greenhouse this
Yeah.
is. And then now they've turned the page and something has been revealed. You don't have quite the power of the cut like film does, but you do have this added bonus that it's not your fault they saw it, it's their fault because they're the one that actually turned the page. Right? Complicit.
So, for example, in like the comic version, you could do a scene where this Ned is talking to the policeman, and in the foreground, behind these trees, a viewer can see like body parts, but
Right.
they're in the
But it's very
midground.
long, yeah.
So you're staring right at these body parts, and behind that is the conversation that's happening. And then in the film, you'd cut from like. Yeah, them talking in the greenhouse, and then you would cut to the back room where
or
there's
you
the
often
bodies
have
or
a
something.
camera move, so you have
Yeah.
like a crane shot, or you have a pitch, right? So it swings down, so the camera shows
Oh,
them
an
like you have a
overhead
wide
where
shot
you
of
can
them,
see bodies
Yeah.
in the trees.
right? And then
that'd
you
be great.
swing the camera down, like for example, you have two people out in the yard. You can see the camera swings down now to a point of view on the other side of the fence where the body is.
a
right?
writing sorry, I was just saying a writing issue that people don't often think about when dealing with a story like this is like I always think of writing as a sort of information management. You've got all this information as a writer about the story, and like the question is like, what do you give the reader when? And what I find more and more is like the reader does not need hardly any information. Like you've got like 300 pieces of information you give them. They really only need 3.
Right.
And it's hard to like, that restraint is very difficult for writers.
So that's the beauty of
like, they don't need to know who
illustration.
this body is. They don't need to know why they were killed.
Yeah.
They don't need to know like.
But here's the beauty of
anything
illustration.
Like
I can show you who the victim was, what their job was, what they last ate. I can show like that they have loved ones. I can do all that in the illustration. You can show the wallet on the table with the family photos.
Yeah, he has
you can
a name tag.
Yeah,
with,
you
like,
can show the
how many-
clothes they were wearing. Like you can do all this stuff that doesn't feel like interruptive exposition that it does in prose,
That's writing.
right? Yeah.
But it's a real discipline, I think, for writers, especially writing who's starting out, to like realize, oh, the reader doesn't need to know why this person's been killed.
Right.
They just need to know. They just need to be in the situation that's happening now. The situation now is this guy is hacking up a body and putting it in the flower pots.
So
or
if
whatever.
you're talking about story structure, they don't need to know that.
They don't need the backstory.
They only need to know that this character is capable of that, so you show them what they've done. But now, if you're going to have them continue on in the story in a way that connects to the reader has feelings and emotions and fears. You need to now show them why they wouldn't want the next victim to suffer the way they've just been presented the first victim, right? EC horror comics didn't do that. One of the reasons they got so much flack in that era, that McCarthy era of like, oh, this is making all the kids evil, is that it was setting up horror as a comedy punchline.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, there's a monster and it ate them. Oh, that guy deserved it. He cheated on his wife and now he's been eaten by her dead ghost, right? Like all of these things were sort of tangential. They weren't part of horror at its real core. So,
yeah, there were jokes. I mean, horror and comedy are really similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And because they have that excess interest. Like I always say, like if you take Hitchcock's The Birds and you wanted to make it into a comedy, you just add more birds, right? But to make it a horror, like if you start like initially, like to make it a horror, you need there's a great scene in that movie where there's like birds on the background landing on the play structure, and they're like characters having a cigarette. Then you just keep cutting back. There's more birds. But at a certain point, there's too many birds, and it's horrible, right? Like there's some invisible line where like there's too many birds now, and it's terrifying and strange and unnatural.
But
it's abnormal.
Too many more, and it's silly now.
Yeah. So like it's a fine line, but like they both have this interest in things like excess, and they have this punchline structuring often.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made, particularly horror today, and we're encouraging you to join the fight and make comics.